Hey friends, welcome to End Time Talks. I'm Joel Richardson. Together, Dalton Thomas and I are tag teaming, each doing 5 to 15 minute segments on the issue of the end times, current events, the interrelationship between those two things, and what the Bible has to say about these matters. Now, if you're looking for more than just bite-sized segments, then do be sure to download the Frontier Alliance International app. This is an app that is chock full of excellent, relevant content. Everything from music to music videos to full-length feature films to studies through different books of the Bible. We've got an end-time study on Daniel and Revelation, articles, all kinds of relevant updates and information. Okay, it is available for free on every major app platform. So download the app, Frontier Alliance International. You will absolutely be very happy that you did. So God bless and Maranatha. Hey friends, welcome back to End Time Talks. In previous sessions, we've been going through the oracle of Gog of Magog, the Battle of Gog-Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39. Now, as I've said multiple times, not only is this an incredibly relevant text that's worth taking some time to really work through and tease out all of the different arguments that surround it, but it's such an overwhelmingly looming, important Old Testament prophecy. But beyond that, in the Western world, particularly among evangelical prophecy writers and students, it's largely been interpreted to be referring to a last days Russian-led multinational invasion of the land of Israel, one of the great battles of the last days, but again, led by Russia. And of course, right now, the news cycle is dominated by the fact that Russia, many of their troops are positioned right on the borders of Ukraine. And so everyone is asking, is Russia about to invade Ukraine? Are we about to enter into World War III? NATO is being alerted, mobilized, and this type of thing. And so it's worth right now, it's very relevant right now to discuss this. Now, in this installment, what we're going to discuss is the question of whether or not the Hebrew word Rosh in Ezekiel 38 is referring to Russia, or if it should be understood as an adjective simply meaning chief. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just begin by looking at five of the most widely used English translations. So the King James says this. It says, Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. So that's the King James Version. The NIV, likewise, says Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Only difference is it adds the word of. The ESV, English Standard Version, says Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, exactly like the NIV. Then you have the NASB, which I often use, and it's Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal. Very different there. Instead of saying the chief, it's the prince of Rosh, and Rosh is used as a proper noun, okay, a toponym, a place name, side by side with Meshech and Tubal. Likewise, interestingly, the New King James says Gog, comma, of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. So again, almost identical to the NASB. Now, it's also worth mentioning that the Septuagint actually includes Rosh as a proper noun there. And that's where, some pretty radical differences, right, between an adjective or a proper noun among the translations. And much of the argument for Rosh as a proper noun does go back to the fact that it's used in the Septuagint. So I want to tease this out. Again, as I said, if you read popular prophecy books, if you pay attention to various prophecy teachers or ministries, oftentimes this is one of the biggest issues that's championed. Okay, so that's among just popular prophecy teachers. Again, I'm not putting them down. I am one. But among the academic community, among scholars, among really widely respected biblical expositors, this view has largely been rejected a long time ago. So I'm just going to sort of give you one quote here just to sort of capture how long this view has been rejected. Okay, so here's a quote from Charles Feinberg. Now, Charles Feinberg is one of the great messianic scholars of last century. So this quote is actually probably from, I'm going to say it might be the 1950s. He says, there have been many writers who connected the name Rosh with the Russians, but this is not generally accepted today. Obviously, Feinberg, of course, is just one of many, many solid conservative scholars that would reject that view. Now, let me just jump in. So throughout the Bible, okay, you have the word Rosh. It's used 602 times throughout the Old Testament. 602 times. Every single time it's used in the sense of chief or head. So a classic use of it that most of you will know is Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so Rosh or Rosh Hashanah is usually how it's said. Now, this is the chief day of the year. It's sort of the Jewish New Year. Rosh Hashanah is not the Russian New Year. Okay, it has nothing to do with Russia. It means chief or head. Every single time it's used throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, it has that meaning of head, chief, head of the year, this type of thing. Okay, but people argue that its one use here in Ezekiel is different. Here it's referring to Russia, and you can see the similarities in sort of the sound. Rosh, Russia, similar consonants. Okay, different vowel, but similar consonants in order. R, Resh. So that's one of the main arguments, is just the similarity of sound. Now here's sort of an interesting point. So Charles Ryrie, again, who did come out of Dallas, he was a professor there for years, known for the Ryrie Study Bible, a classic dispensationalist teacher, just passed away just a few years ago. In his Ryrie Study Bible, this is what he says. Again, because the teachers that teach us will often teach it, it's like everyone believes this, as if there's no dissent other than liberals, which is nonsense. Again, I want to make that clear. So this is what Ryrie says. He states that the Prince of Rosh should be translated as the chief prince. Okay, so that's in his study Bible, which is, of course, what I believe. It should not be a proper noun. It should not be a place name. It should be used consistently as it's used throughout the rest of the Scriptures, simply to mean chief or head. Now, here's an interesting bit of development within the field of Hebrew scholarship, Old Testament Hebrew scholarship. So I'm not sure exactly what year, but there's a guy named Daniel I. Block. Okay, Daniel Block is, I'm going to say he's like an Ezekiel wizard. I mean, that's kind of a joke, but I mean, so Block authored a 2-volume commentary on the book of Ezekiel. It's part of the New International Commentary on the Old Testament, the Nikot series, and it's arguably the best commentary on Ezekiel that has ever been written. Massive 2-volume set. Now, after working through all of the grammatical linguistic arguments, for those that fight, saying it should be an adjective, meaning chief, and those who say it should be a noun, meaning Rosh, and thus referring to Russia, after really working through all the arguments in his commentary, Block ultimately says, look, they're both a little bit right. It should be translated as a noun, but as a descriptive noun. It should not be used as a proper noun, not as a place name. So here is Block's translation. His is Gog, of the land of Magog, the prince, chief of Meshech and Tubal. So within the field of Old Testament Hebrew scholarship, this is now, consensus among Old Testament Hebrew scholars is Block's translation is probably the best translation of all of the different options out there. And it's widely agreed upon, again, among conservative scholars, that it should not be translated as Rosh. It should be translated as the prince, chief of Meshech and Tubal. So Gog is from the land of Magog, and he's the chief. He's the prince over Meshech and Tubal, which were tribal regions in Asia Minor, Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. Okay, so we've dealt with a bit of the history, we've dealt with the grammar. Now I want to continue. What if, just for the sake of argument, what if it should be translated as a proper noun? What if Block is wrong? I'm going to quote Dr. Tommy Ice. He says, it is very likely that the name Rosh is actually derived from the name Tiras, which is in Genesis 10:2 in the Table of Nations. So all of the other names in Ezekiel's oracle are in the Genesis 10 Table of Nations. And this describes the nations as they, after the flood, after Noah and his children dispersed and so forth, and it kind of lays them all out. And you don't have Rosh. Rosh is not there in the Table of Nations, but there is a Tiras. And Dr. Ice goes through how, sort of from one language to the next, from sort of the Assyrian to the this and that basically they ended up dropping the T. And so Tiras became Rosh. So he says, if it's a place name, it should actually be referring to Tiras, which, by the way, he goes on to explain, refers to the people who became the Thracians. So now here's a map, and there's the ancient region of Thrace. Okay, so this was basically sort of in between modern-day Turkey and Bulgaria and Greece. So the point is this: even if it was a proper noun referring to Tyros, that doesn't refer to Russia. This is so important. And again, I don't believe it is a proper noun, but even if it was, it's still not a good argument to say it's pointing to Russia. Because essentially what happened is in the medieval period, okay, so this is the medieval period, these Vikings, they came down from Scandinavia and they intermingled with some of the peoples that were up there in modern-day Ukraine and Russia. They intermarried, but they're the ones that brought the name Rus, from which we get the modern name Russia. It does not come from some ancient Hebrew word, Rosh. There's no historical connection. Rus is a Scandinavian term. You can trace the etymology and history of it back to the Vikings, not to Hebrew. So this is the thing, is you can't simply say, well, one word sounds similar in two different languages and assume because of the similarity of sound, there must be a connection. This is like a horrible, horrible argument. Now, here's another quote from Dr. Michael Heiser. He says, "The idea that the sound of a Hebrew word is transferable to another language to coincide with the meaning of a word in that other language is absurd and laughable. Does the Chinese word chin really speak of the English chin, and so the tip of the jaw? Of course not. Does the Hebrew month Nisan really point to a particular automobile? Does the Hebrew word yam, which means sea, indicate something to eat glazed with brown sugar? We call them sweet potatoes or yams. Words in many languages sound the same for a very simple reason. The human mouth can only make a limited number of sounds. Anyone who makes these sort of arguments to guide their interpretation tells the world they know nothing about languages, biblical or otherwise." So kind of a real stake to the heart from Dr. Michael Heiser. And so again, as we wrap this up, really the best translation is that it's Gog of the land of Magog, the prince, the chief of Meshech and Tubal. So this is a bit of a long, short for End Time Talks, but I wanted to go through this because it's so important. So that's it for now. Look forward to the next installment. Till then, God bless, guys, and Maranatha.
Thank you for watching this session of End Time Talks. Frontier Alliance International, as an organization and spiritual family, we're focused on laying foundations and making disciples where there are none in the Middle East, specifically in the Muslim world. I want to ask you to consider supporting FAI at just $5 a month. $5 a month is going to go into a pool of a global family of people that are giving $5 a month that goes into the hands of laborers serving on the front lines in the most difficult, challenging places in the world today, laying foundations where there are none and making disciples where there are none. Again, thank you guys for watching, and thank you for supporting FAI.